Alrighty, it's that day again. Welcome to the Altar of the Brood podcast. The name is Paul, also known as MTG Anonymous on YouTube, Patreon, MTG Goldfish, Discord, pretty much everywhere you can see Magic players. You can find me at MTG Anonymous. Alrighty, so today's deck is Paruns, Pingers, and Players. This is a 3DH version with Niv-Mizzet Parun at the helm. It's blue, 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 red, red, red for a legendary creature, dragon, wizard. This spell can be casted, can't be countered, It's a 5/5 with flying. Whenever you draw a card, Niv-Mizzet deals 1 damage to any target, and then whenever a player casts an instant or sorcery spell, you may draw a card. So the whole reason for this deck is pingers. So we got random pingers. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery card, they're going to be dealing damage to our opponents. There's Paruns because, well, Niv-Mizzet is the Paruns, and then there are players because all of this damage is going to go straight to our opponents. Any targets, unless there are 1/1s, 2/2s that we need to pick off with Niv-Mizzet, we're mostly going to be hitting our opponents with this damage. And then also, another aspect of this deck is we're going to have as many cards that can make tokens as possible inside of our instant and sorcery slot, so that way we can take advantage of the card that this podcast is about. But anyway, here's the music, and then we'll get into the deck tech. Alright, so now that that is done, we can go ahead and get into the deck list. We're going to get into the deck list. So first off, we have Electrostatic Field for 1 and a red. You get a Creature Wall 0/4 with Defender. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So Niv-Mizzet deals the 1 damage anytime you draw a card, which is awesome, but this deals 1 damage to each opponent. So that's way more damage than 1. That's could be up to 3, honestly. The best part about it is it's a 0/4, so it's a lot harder for it to be killed, especially compared to other creature cards that are in this list. So yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention the budget report. For MTGO, it's 2.88 ticks, and then for paper is $38.49. So this is probably one of the cheapest decks in paper that I've made. If you want to go to a 50 card budget, I'll explain how to do that in a later video, probably on Patreon, so follow me there. So Goblin Electromancer is next for a blue and a red. You get a 2/2 Goblin Wizard. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So this is better than a Mana Rock because this reduces the cost of our cards, of our instant and sorcery cards, 1 for each one. So a ramp card would only give us 1 or 2 extra mana, while this will give us maybe anywhere up to 3 mana because it makes it 1 less. So yeah, and then for X spells, this also helps because it gives us 1 free in the X, so we can just cast for the colors and it still gets 1 X. But yeah, that's why that's in here. Kiln Fiend for 1 and a red. You get a 1/2 Elemental Beast. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Kiln Fiend, gets +3/+0 until end of turn. So that's in here because, yeah, sometimes we need beat sticks. Now, unfortunately, the toughness doesn't go up, so we're just going to swing. So they're going to have to block it with something, and this will probably die, but it's just in here for early plays. We're not planning on playing a whole bunch of instant and sorceries until Niv-Mizzet is out, so we're not necessarily worried about this. Nivix Guildmage is next for blue and a red. You get a 2/2 Human Wizard. For 1 blue-red, draw a card, then discard a card. Or for 2 blue-red, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. So the reason I chose this is because we have Ral Storm Conduit in the deck. I'm pretty sure that's the one I like. Yeah, Ral Storm Conduit is a card that interacts with this. Whenever we copy a spell, it deals 1 damage. So being able to have 4 extra mana to copy something like Thunderous Wrath, Notorious Throng, Goblin War Party, stuff like that, Empty the Warrens. We just want to make copies of the bigger spells and then make sure Ral Storm Conduit is out. Also, make more copies of creature making instants and sorceries, and then one of our artifacts triggers. So, yeah. Thermal Alchemist is another pinger. For 1 and a red, you get a 0/3 Human Shaman with Defender. it says tap deals 1 damage to each opponent, and then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, untap it. So when we play this, we're not going to play instants or sorceries until we can tap it. We don't have ways to make haste, I don't think. I think there are a few, but I don't think any of them will be able to be used early. So turn 2, if we have this, we play it. Turn 3, we tap it, cast an instant or sorcery, untap it, and then tap it again. So we can do 2 damage to each opponent. And then once we get the Goblin Electromancer out, we start playing our really cheap spells. We'll be able to deal 4 or 5 damage a turn, and then our opponents will probably die. Young Pyromancer is next. For 1 in a red, you get a 2/1 Human Shaman. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a 1/1 red elemental creature token on the battlefield. So again, triggers with one of the artifacts. You probably already know what it is, so you can pause, take a second, and guess what it is. But I'm going to keep going because I know what it is. But basically, we get those 1/1s on the battlefield. They are probably going to swing every turn, or we'll hold them back for blockers because this deck does a whole bunch of instants and sorcery style stuff. So we actually don't have many creatures. There are 24. It could be less, but it also could be more. And then also we need cards that can protect our planeswalkers. So these 1/1s will basically just be used to block. Aven Windmage is next for 2 and a blue. It's a 2/2 bird wizard with flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Aven Windmage gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Again, same thing with Kiln Fiend. Once this is in, we're just going to use the attack. Since it has flying, it has a little bit of evasion. So I plan on attacking with this every turn that I can into someone who can't block flying or someone who has something smaller than Aven Windmage. What makes it better than the Kiln Fiend is it gets +1/+1. So as its toughness goes, as its power goes up, its toughness goes up as well. And then with Kiln Fiend, that doesn't happen. It just gets +3/+0. So it'll probably die most of the time. Bloodwater Entity is next. For 1, a blue and a red, you get a 2/2 elemental with flying. It has prowess, meaning whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. It's basically the same thing as Aven Windmage. And then when it enters the battlefield, you may put target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library. So once we've gotten to late game, or if we had to discard something, if we're trying to draw cards using the Thermal Alchemist, make sure that's the right card. Yeah, oh nope, not the Thermal Alchemist, the Nivix Guildmage, seeing as its first ability, pay 1, pay blue and red, draw a card, then discard a card. If we discard something early that we might need, preferably an instant, then what'll happen is Bloodwater Entity enters the battlefield, we get to put it on top of our library, next turn we draw it, and we use it. Now we also have cards, I'm pretty sure we have 1 or 2 cards that have Miracle, and so if we do still have those in the list, then you'll be able to put that on top and then Miracle into it, because that'd be the first card drawn. Next off, we've got G-Electrode. For 1, a blue and a red, it's a 0/1 weird. Tap it, deals 1 damage to target creature or player, and then whenever you play an instant or sorcery, you may untap it. So again, this is the same thing as the Thermal Alchemist. We tap it, deal 1 damage. Now this is only to 1 creature or player, so this is not as good. But regardless, we play an instant or sorcery, untap it, we get to deal damage again. So what's better about this than the Thermal Alchemist? Yes, it can deal damage to opponents, but the G-Electrode can deal the 1 damage to a creature and maybe kill it, protect us. Again, Niv-Mizzet also does the same thing, so yeah, but Niv-Mizzet also doesn't have to tap for it. Graceful Adept is next. For 2 and a blue, you get a 1/3 human wizard. You have no maximum hand size, because every time we play an instant or sorcery, Niv-Mizzet will replace that with another card. Also, whenever an opponent plays one too. So we need ways to make our hand make our hand as big as possible and let that happen, because if we don't, then we'll have to discard every turn, and then we'll have to use Bloodwater Entity, even though we want to use it, but not early. Gutter Snipe's next. For 2 and a red, you get a 2/2 Goblin Shaman. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, deals 2 damage to each opponent. So again, really good. We have lots of instants and sorceries. There are 27 of them, but they deals 2 damage to each opponent. We can play a whole bunch of spells each turn. Yeah. Goes great with the electrostatic field, because then each opponent losing 3 life. The Thermal Alchemist would make that 4 life, and then you can untap the Thermal Alchemist with that instant or sorcery. Tap it again, 5 life. So 5 life for each spell cast. For the first spell, instant or sorcery spell cast each turn is pretty good. Next up, as the command zone calls him Tim, we have the Prodigal Sorcerer. Prodigal Sorcerer for 2 and a blue, you get a 1/1 human wizard. Tap. It deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Now granted, No idea why they call him Tim. I watch their videos, but I work 7 days straight, so sometimes I get a little behind. I'm gonna go back and we'll figure that out. And when I do, I'm gonna mention that on a podcast. But for now, it's basically just another pinger. So again, falls in the second category of pingers, and then it can deal damage to players. So Spellgorger Weird's next for 2 and a red. You get a 2/2 Weird whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Spellgorger Weird. So what's great about that is planeswalkers, enchantments, and artifacts are included with that, not just spells. So it can get really big with this deck. This deck is going to focus on the instants and sorceries, of course, but the artifacts and enchantments are also super important. Spellkeeper Weird for 2 and a blue. You get a 1/4 creature Weird. Pay 2 and tap, sacrifice it, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. I would like this better if it put on top of the library, since we have a card with Miracle, but regardless, this card is still good. We can block and then do that, sacrifice it to return the card, and then the damage from the card that we blocked doesn't go through, so it helps us a lot. Surakar Spellblade for 1 a blue and a blue. You get a 2/1 Surakar. This is the first time I've ever seen this card, so you gotta bear with me on this one. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may put a charge counter on Surakar Spellblade. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw X cards, where X is the number of charge counters on it. So this card is really interesting. Every time we get an instant or sorcery card, we get to put stuff on it, and then if we can find someone we can get into with a 2/1, relatively hard, but if we do have someone like that, because we pinged all their creatures down with Niv-Mizzet, then we swing into them, we draw that many cards, Niv-Mizzet deals that much damage. So this is a really good card with Niv-Mizzet. This is a discovery for this deck, because I've never heard of this card beforehand. Found it on Scryfall. Weaver of Lightning's next for 2 and a red. You get a 1/4 human shaman with reach. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery card, Weaver of Lightning deals 1 damage to a target creature an opponent controls. I don't really like this one per se. It can pick off 1/1s, but if you don't have something like that, then it really doesn't do anything. Now, if you had a way to give this Death Touch, which I don't have in this deck, but I am planning on running a different Pingers deck, spoiler alert, if you had an equipment that gives this Death Touch, because it deals the damage whenever the instant or sorcery card is played, then you can kill whatever you ping with the 1 damage. We Dragonauts is next for 1 a blue and a red. You get a 1/3 fairy wizard. It has flying, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, We Dragonauts gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Again, Kiln Fiend, Aven Wind Mage, and G-Electrode, I think. Nope, not G-Electrode. And Bloodwater Entity are the ones that do this. This one is better because it's a flyer. So Aven Wind Mage and this one are the best of the 4 that we've mentioned so far, but also I just like that it has flying. It's really it. Erratic Cyclops is next for 3 and a red. It's a 0/8 Cyclops Shaman with trample. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Erratic Cyclops gets X +X+0 until end of turn, where X is that spell's mana cost. So how that works, if we play something like Thunderous Wrath, it gets 6 because a converted mana cost for red is 6. And then also, if we're able to play multiple spells each turn, especially since Goblin Electromancer is in the deck and makes spells cheaper, then we'll be able to play more instants and sorceries. We'll be able to do more damage with the Erratic Cyclops. And then that means that's less damage that Electrostatic Field, Niv-Mizzet, Bloodwater Entity, all those cards have to deal damage. So that's less damage we have to deal with the Erratic Cyclops, and then also we're probably trading something for this. Murmuring Mystic, almost everyone in Commander knows what this is. For 3 and a blue, it's a 1/5 human wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 bird illusion creature token with flying. So this is just Young Pyromancer. This card make 1/1s each time we cast an instant or sorcery spell. So that means we have even more blockers. And then the best thing about this is that it makes bird creatures with flying. Now, the bird doesn't really matter, but again, flying is important. Most of the time, people are using flying creatures to attack, especially against decks that make tokens. And then also, one of the enchantments or artifacts cares about these. Talran Sky Summoner, since I just mentioned a card that makes 1/1 birds, how about we make 2/2 drakes instead? For 2 a blue and a blue, you get a 2/2 legendary Merfolk Wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a 2/2 blue drake creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So Murmuring Mystic's good, Talran's better. So 2/2 versus 1/1. It's easy. Preferably what we do is we'd swing with these 2/2s at our opponents to try to kill them, and then use the 1/1 birds to block, or vice versa. It depends on what our opponents have. If our opponents are having decks that make lots of tokens, then we need the 2/2s more than likely. So yeah. Charmbreaker Devils is a really important one for 5 and a red. You get a 4/4 creature devil. At the beginning of your upkeep, return an instant or sorcery card at random from your graveyard to your hand. Now, since every single one of these instants or sorcery cards in our deck is important to the way we play, this is great. And then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Charmbreaker Devils gets +4/+0 until end of turn. Now what's important about this is, yes, it comes in 8/4 when you cast your first spell, 12/4 when you cast your next one. It doesn't have trample, so that really doesn't matter. They can jump block it, and then that kind of hurts us. But the best thing is, at the beginning of our upkeep, we return an instant or sorcery card. Now if it's something important, like Empty the Warrens, Goblin War Party, Skewer the Critic, something like that, makes it so that we can do more things with our cards. Yeah, I think that's important. Charmbreaker Devils may be one of the best cards in the deck. Niv-Mizzet Parun for 4 blue and a red. You get a 2/4 weird wizard. So, the third weird. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an instant or sorcery. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your library, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. Again, reason this is in here, Rowstorm Conduit is going to allow us to copy again. And then Nivix Guildmage is also going to... Guildmage is going to allow us to copy spells. So now, playing something off the top of our library, we get to play it with Milik, and we get to copy it for free using Milik, and then we can copy it again using the Nivix Guildmage. So, yeah, that's really good for this deck. And then because we're casting all those spells, then we're going to be able to deal 1 damage using the Niv-Mizzet. Speaking of Niv-Mizzet, we have another one, Niv-Mizzet the Firemind. It's the cheapest one of all of them. For 2 a blue, a red and a red, you get a 4/4 Dragon Wizard. So, yeah, we're still a Dragon Wizard here. It has flying. And whenever you draw a card, Niv-Mizzet the Firemind deals 1 damage to target creature or player. And then you can tap and draw a card. Now, both of these Niv-Mizzets say whenever you draw a card, deal damage. So, we can use this Niv-Mizzet to tap and then draw 1 card and deal 2 damage. And so then, every time we cast an instant spell, we draw a card. Every time an opponent casts an instant spell, we draw a card. We deal 2 damage to any target. So, yeah, Niv-Mizzet the Firemind, amazing. You could switch this for Niv-Mizzet Parun. They both have the same CMC at 6, so they're both as hard to get out as possible, but they're both really good. Jin Illuminatus, however you say this. It's 5, is it? So, you can either pay blue or red for either of those. It's a 3/5 Jin with flying, and each instant or sorcery you play has replicate. The replicate cost is equal to its mana cost. So basically, if I play Skewer the Critics, which has 2 and a red, every time I play 2 and a red again, then I'm able to do this again, copy the spell again. So, it's really fun to do that, especially when you have Rowstorm Conduit, because every time you make a copy of something, you deal damage. So, save this, have a 1 cost mana card, play it, copy it a whole bunch of times, deal a whole bunch of damage with it and with Rowstorm Conduit. So, that's it for the creatures. Next, we have 2 Planeswalkers. As I said, I like to make tokens with this deck because one of the artifacts cares about that kind of thing. But Shahili, Sublight Artificer, is one of the best token makers for 1, and then Izzet 2 times. You get a 5 Loyalty Shahili. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. And then -2, target artifact you control becomes a copy of another artifact or creature you control until the end of turn, except it's an artifact in addition to its type. Now, we have cards that deal damage to each of our opponents every time we cast an instant or sorcery. So if we use that -2 and make a copy of the Electrostatic Field, the Gutter Snipe, then we get to deal even more damage each time we do that. Now, we can only do this twice, and we don't have ways to give our cards tokens, so we don't have a way to increase the amount of loyalty on this card. So once we've used that twice, then that's all we can do. So what we'll do is we'll have this, we'll keep making those 1/1 tokens by casting our spells, and then once we get to a point where we can cast multiple spells a turn, we use the -2, turn one of those turbos into something, and then we deal a whole bunch of damage. And then last is Ral's Storm Conduit. I've mentioned him a couple times because he cares about copies. For 2 blue and a red, you get a 4 loyalty Ral. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 1 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. So this is our planeswalker removal in this deck. If we are able to cast instants or sorceries or copy them, then we're going to deal this damage to planeswalkers first. And if not, then we're going to deal damage to the player with the lowest life total, because we don't want to be the threat. Hitting the lowest life total person is probably the safest bet, as they're probably not doing as well. And then also you can use this to help knock them out. Niv-Mizzet Parun and Niv-Mizzet the Firemind are both great cards to help with that, seeing as they can hit any target. So that's basically it. Now let's go to the 27 spells. Just a quick break from the deck tech first. If we had a sponsor, it would go here. Because we don't have one, if you'd like to be a sponsor, feel free to hit me up anywhere. You know where MTG Anonymous is, preferably Twitter, at MTG Anonymous1. I'll take any sponsor that wants to sponsor, and just send me a message over at Twitter. Thank you. But let's get into the rest of the deck tech. So now we're on 27 spells. First off is Burn from Within. Burn Within costs X and a red. It's a sorcery. Burn from Within deals X damage to target creature or player. If a creature is dealt damage this way, it loses indestructible until end of turn. And if it dies this turn, exile it instead. So the reason I have it like this is I don't want to deal with cards. I don't want to deal with the gods, and so this is able to kill the gods. If they show up, it exiles them instead of letting them die. It doesn't deal with the god Eternals, because if they die or are exiled, they go from the third from the top, but this does great with the new gods or the old Theros gods. Just basically, this is important. We need to save this for as late as possible for in case a god shows up. Condescend. For X and a blue, it's an instant counter target spell unless its controller pays X and then scry 2. Now this is in here for the counter target spell. We can also use other abilities to copy it, and so then they have to pay more to prevent from losing the spell. But regardless, the scry 2 is also good. We'll probably put the cards we scry at the bottom, seeing as we need instants and sorceries to draw into. So yeah. Creator's Clause is next, another X spell. X and a red is a sorcery. It deals X damage to target creature or player. And then if it has Ferocious, it deals X +2 to that creature or player instead if you control a creature with 4 or greater power. Now, Niv-Mizzet, the Jinn, and the other Niv-Mizzet are both bigger than 4. Charmbreaker Devils is bigger than 4 as well. So if we have those cards, then this deals X +2 instead. Then if we also have Goblin or Electromancer, then it costs 1 less, so basically that's adding another mana. Firebolt next for 1 red is a sorcery. Firebolt deals 2 damage to any target, and then Flashback for 4 red. Haven't gone over Flashback this podcast yet, so we're going to go over that now. You may cast this card from your graveyard for its flashback cost, then exile it. Now, since this is a sorcery, the way you would have to do this, you pay the red, deal the 2 damage to any target, you draw your card. With Niv-Mizzet Parun, you deal 1 damage to another target, or the same target, whatever. Then, after that, both of those instances have resolved. You have to pay the 4 and the red to exile that card from your graveyard and cast it. So now, once you've cast it again, you deal that 2 damage. You've cast an instant or sorcery spell, so Niv-Mizzet triggers again. So from that interaction, you've made 6 damage from 6 mana, which is that's relatively good. It could be better, but again, relatively good. Kuldotha Rebirth for 1 red. As an additional cost, you have to sacrifice an artifact. Now, Shahili Sublime Artificer makes artifacts as you cast a non-creature spells. So as we make them, then we have something for this. But once we do, we'll sacrifice one of those 1/1s, or is it Glowstone also be one we could sacrifice? But if that happens, once we do that, once we paid the red, sacrifice the artifact, you get to put 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens onto the battlefield. So yeah, 3 for 1 is really good. Now, after it's cast and we make copies of it, those copies are not cast. I don't think. I'm pretty sure they're not cast. Yeah, they're just copied. So then, say we have Djinn Illuminous. We've paid the red and sacrificed the artifact. We keep paying red over and over again. We don't have to sacrifice again because we're not casting the card. But then we get to make more goblin tokens. So it's actually really fun. Speaking of making tokens, next up is Satyr's Cunning. For 1 red, you get a sorcery. Create a 1/1 red Satyr creature token with this creature can't block. And then it can also escape. Escape says for whatever the cost is, exile a number of cards and return that card. You can cast a card from the graveyard. So for this one, escape is 2 and a red, and then the exile cost is 2. So we have to exile 2 cards from our graveyard and pay 2 and a red. We can cast this from our graveyard. So since there aren't ways to bring back enchantments, artifacts, or planeswalkers from our graveyard, what we'll do is we'll use this escape ability to get rid of those. Also, there are spells that aren't great that we'll be able to get rid of too. Now, I don't know how escape works with Djinn Illuminous. I would think, since we're casting it again, we'd be able to cast it for just red, maybe. But since we cast it for its escape cost, I think the Djinn Illuminatus will make us pay the escape cost again. Next is Shock. 1 red, Shock deals 2 damage to any target. Everyone knows what Shock is. Everyone owns a Shock. They're really cheap cards. Spare Pierce is next for 1 blue. Counter target's non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2. So if someone tries to basically counter one of our big creatures, Djinn, Illuminatus, Niv-Mizzet Melek, or Niv-Mizzet Parun, we'll spell Pierce, so that way we'll be able to keep it. We don't want to be trying to play these big creatures again. So once we have Niv-Mizzet on the battlefield, we need to protect it at all costs, and what we'll do is we'll basically block non-creature spells that would target it. Arc Trail is our first 2 mana cost. 1 for 1 and a red. You get a sorcery. Arc Trail deals 2 damage to target creature or player, and 1 damage to another target creature or player. So for 2, we're doing 3. So if we decide to copy it with Djinn Illuminatus, then we do it again. So 6 for 4, or 9 for 6, so it just keeps going up in value. We don't have many big spells, so that also helps out a lot. Dragon Fodder. For 1 and a red, create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens. Yeah, Krenko would be happy if it was in this deck, but it's not because it's not a pinger. So we'll just make these 2 red goblin tokens. Again, Djinn Illuminatus is out, and we can make more. We can use the -2 from Ral to make more, so essentially, we can make a whole bunch of goblins if we felt like it. Essence Scatter's next for 1 in the blue. It's an instant counter-target creature spell. So if they have something that can target us when it enters the battlefield, we're going to counter it. We don't want to deal with that. Krenko's Command, like I said, Krenko would be happy if it was in this deck. For 1 in a red, it's a sorcery. Put 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens onto the battlefield. So the reason these are in here, Dragon Fodder and Krenko's Command, they're really cheap ticket-wise to be able to play. And then there's 1 artifact that cost 1/3 of the budget. So I had to choose cards that were cheap. Mana Leak is next, another counter spell for 1 in a blue. It's an instant counter target spell unless its controller plays 3. Negate is next for 1 in a blue, counter target non-creature spell. Again, you're holding this for removal for Niv-Mizzet, Niv-Mizzet the Firemine, or Djinn Illuminatus. That's it. Psychic Rebuttal for 1 in a blue. It's an instant counter target instant or sorcery spell that targets you. And then Spell Mastery, if there are 2 or more instants and or sorcery cards in your graveyard, you may copy the spell countered this way. You may choose new targets for the opponent, for the copy. So if they target you with anything that can remove your spell, you cast Psychic Rebuttal. Since there are probably going to be more than 2 instant or sorcery cards in our graveyard, then we'll be able to copy the spell, target one of our opponent's stuff. So yeah, that's what I like. Punishing Fire is next for 1 in a red. It's an instant. Punishing Fire deals 2 damage to target creature or player. Whenever an opponent gains life, you may pay red. If you do, return it from your graveyard to your hand. So now this is great. We can keep casting this spell over and over again for its 2. If an opponent gains life with Aetherflux Reservoir or something crazy like that, we pay red, it returns to our hand. And then we have another spell to cast. And so that means we have another trigger for Electrostatic Field, for Thermal Alchemist, for Young Pyromancer, pretty much every creature in this deck. Searing Spear is next for 1 and a red. It's an instant, deals 3 damage to target creature or player. Again, real cheap spell. Browbeat for 2 and a red. It's a sorcery. Any player may have Browbeat deal 5 damage to him or her. If no one does, target player draws 3 cards. Now, this is the real reason Jin Illuminatus is in here. So we're going to pay as much mana as we can to keep copying this spell. Our opponents will not want us to draw the 3, seeing as we'll deal a damage each time we draw a card. And then also if Niv-Mizzet Parun's out, then we'll have 2. So they deal that 5 damage to themselves, and then they don't get 6 damage. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that we're able to copy this as many times as possible, so it's less than likely that our opponent will be able to hit themselves. And then once we draw those 3 cards, then we get to choose who we hit. So Cancel's next for 1 a blue and a blue. Instant, counter target spell. Again, we don't want things targeting our side of the board, so we're going to cancel it. Didn't Say Please is another one for 1 a blue and a blue. It's an instant counter target spell. Its controller puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into their graveyard. So this is a little bit mill on top. Artifact that cares about that is in here. So once we do this, that's 3 cards that artifact will have to do. Dissipate for 1 a blue and a blue. It's an instant counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. This is great for the God Eternals, as it exiles them before they leave the battlefield. If they leave the battlefield, then they're able to do the 3rd from the top thing. If they don't make it, if they're just a spell, then they don't count as creatures, and so then it'll stay exiled. Well, granted, they're probably being used as commander, so that doesn't really help, but regardless. Dissipate, really good. Molten Birth next for 1 a red and a red. It's a sorcery. Put 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens onto the battlefield. Then flip a coin. If you win, return it to its owner's hand. We don't really care about that per se because we can copy it with Jin Illuminatus. Now, the copies cannot be returned to the hand, so it doesn't matter if we win the flip or not. But, yeah. Jin Illuminatus is probably one of the better cards in the deck. Unfortunately, it's not a legendary creature, so we can't build around it, but it is still good. Skewer the Critics is next for 2 and a red. It's a sorcery. It deals 3 damage to any target. And then Speculate. Pay 1 red. You may cast this spell for its Speculate cost rather than its mana cost if an opponent loses life this turn. So if an opponent got 1 damage dealt to them somehow, if they tapped something that made them lose life, you get to cast this for 1 red. Again, don't know how Jin Illuminatus interacts with that, with Spectacle, so I'm not going to mention it. Empty the Warrens is next for 3 and a red. It's a sorcery. Put 2 +1/+1. 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens onto the battlefield. It has Storm, so when you cast this spell, copy it for its each spell cast before this turn. So if we've been interacting with stuff, once we copy this spell, we're good. Again, don't know how Jin Illuminatus works with this, seeing as we're copying the cast spell. So I don't know. I really want to know how that works, but I don't think it works like that. I don't think if you copy a card with the Storm, it works very well. Goblin War Party's next for 3 and a red. Sorcery, choose one. Either create 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, or creatures you control have +1/+1 and gain haste until end of turn. This is great for once we have a lot of tokens. We can make a lot of tokens, especially through our creatures that care about if we cast instants or sorceries. But then we can also entwine this by paying blue 2 and a red extra. So for 7 mana, we get 3 1/1s, and each creature we control gets +1/+1 and haste. So that makes it so that the Goblin War Party is able to swing in. Now, a fun way to do this, if we pay all that for the entwine cost, and then we copy it with Jin Illuminatus, we pay just the original 4, and then we get 3 more 1/1s. So Notorious Throng for 3 and a red, 3 and a blue. It's tribal sorcery rogue, and then it has Prowl. You may pay for this card. You may play this for its Prowl cost if you dealt combat damage to a player this turn with a rogue. I don't think we have any rogues in this deck, so that doesn't actually matter. But the Prowl cost is 5 and a blue anyway. So first, put X 1/1 black fairy rogue creatures onto the battlefield with flying, where X is the number of damage dealt to your opponent's turn. our creatures can deal a whole bunch of damage. And then we can copy this by paying 4 again with Jin Illuminatus. So, but if its prowl cost was paid, then take an extra turn after this one. If we had a rogue, which I don't think we do, if we copied the spell, we get to take another turn after that. And so if we kept copying the spell over and over again, we would make another turn. So yeah, that's fun. Thunderous Wrath is next. For 4 red and a red, Thunderous Wrath deals 5 damage to target creature or player, and then it has Miracle. You may cast this card for its Miracle cost when you draw a card if it's the first card you drew this turn. So like I said, if Bloodwater Entity, when it enters the battlefield, we put Thunderous Wrath on top of our library, we draw for a turn, or draw whenever, we pay the red, and we get to deal the damage. Works, right? For artifacts, Altar of the Brood, you know what it does. We all know what it does, the name of the podcast. For 1, it's an artifact whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control. Each opponent puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. That's the reason why we have so many cards, creatures, planeswalkers, and regular spells that make tokens. As we make those tokens, not only does Niv-Mizzet deal damage to our opponents and or their creatures, but also they have to mill, and so that means they have less answers for Niv-Mizzet. Izzet's Cluestone is next for 3. It's an artifact. Tap, add blue or red to your mana pool, and then blue or red, tap, sacrifice it, draw a card. So if we need to deal 1 additional damage, pay that, sacrifice this, draw a card. Then we get to ping with Niv-Mizzet. Firemind's Vessel for 4. It's an artifact. It enters battlefield tap, but it adds 2 mana of different colors since we need 3 blue and 3 red for our commander. This is a great one because we can tap for blue and red, and then we'll be able to just pay 2 blue, 2 red. Seal of the Guild Pack is next. For 5, it's an artifact. As it enters the battlefield, choose 2 colors. Because we're Izzet, and we have the Niv-Mizzet Parun in the deck. And what I like about the deck card is that Izzet is the set symbol that's lighted up, but regardless. Each spell you cast costs 1 less to cast for each of the chosen colors it is. So, for example, Niv-Mizzet the Firemind with Seal of the Guild Pack out will only cost blue, blue, red, red because it's both colors. Now, Niv-Mizzet Parun, since it doesn't have any colorless mana pips in it, once it's died once, if Seal of the Guild Pack is out, then we get to return it for just its regular mana cost. Then the same thing for Izzet Paragon. Instead of being 4 blue-red, it'll be 2 blue-red. We Dragonauts, unfortunately, Bloodwater Entity and Gia Electrode, they only lose the 1 since that's all they have. And then anything that's not blue-red costs 1 less. Then Ral is also 1. It'll be free, or it'll be blue and red, and then Shahili will be just blue. Or will be just blue or red, excuse me. That's it for artifacts. Sweet, simple. Seal of the Guild Pack costs 1.11 ticks. So again, over 1/3 of the deck. Firemind's Research is next. For blue and a red, it's an enchantment. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a charge counter on Firemind's Research. Pay 1 and a blue, and remove 2 charge counters from it, draw cards, so then we get to deal damage using Niv-Mizzet, probably what we're going to do most of the time. Or pay 1 and a red, remove 5 charge counters from it, deal 5 damage to any target. Again, we got plenty of spells in this deck. So we're going to keep playing spells over and over again, and then as we need to, we can draw cards using this, or we can deal 5 damage to any target. Eyes of the Watcher is next for 2 and a blue. It's an enchantment. Whenever you play an instant or sorcery spell, you may pay 1. If you do, scry 2. So since we have so many, we can scry a whole bunch, put anything we don't need on the bottom, anything we do need, keep it on the top. And then also, since Niv-Mizzet Parun cares if we cast instant or sorceries, once we've played the instant or sorcery and pay the 1 to scry 2, we get to look and see what we draw next. So, Trail of Evidence is next for 2 and a blue. It's an enchantment. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, investigate. Investigate says put a colorless clue artifact token onto the battlefield with 2 sacrifices artifact, draw a card. So we're gonna accumulate as many of these clue counters as possible, so that way we can just pop them whenever we need to kill a creature by drawing a card. Jace's Sanctum is next for 3 and a blue. It's an enchant. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less, so this goes with Goblin Electromancer. So if both of these are out, then all of our spells cost 2 less. And then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, scry 1. So Eyes of the Watcher says we have to pay to do that scrying. For Jace's Sanctum, we don't. And then also those spells are cheaper. So with Jace's Sanctum out and with Eye of the Watcher, you can use the 1 mana that you saved because Jace's Sanctum removed the cost to 1 less. Then you can use that 1 that you would have had to spend to scry 2. And then since you scryed 2, after that you get to scry 1. And so then you get to choose what's on top. Arcane Melee's next for 4 and a blue. Instant and sorcery spells cost 2 less to cast. Now, because I have a whole bunch, I want them to be as cheap as possible. And then also we have Goblin Empty the Warren, So since we have a Storm card, we want this as cheap as possible. Now, once we go to copy a card using Djinn Illuminatus, we do not get to reduce the amount because it's equal to its replicate cost is equal to its mana cost, but we're not casting that, we're making a copy. So, if I were to have Arcane, Melee, Jace's Sanctum, and Goblin Electromancer out, yes, Thunderous Wrath would be only 2 red mana, but if I copy it with Djinn Illuminatus, I have to pay the entire 6. I do know that much. Swarm Intelligence, since I just mentioned copying instants or sorceries. For 6 and a blue, it's an enchantment. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Yeah, so, again, lots of instants or sorceries in the deck. Rouse Storm Conduit will deal damage each time instant or sorcery is cast or copied. So Swarm Intelligence automatically going to help us deal 1 damage to any target. Well, not any target, creature or... not a creature, an opponent, or a planeswalker. So we get to deal 2 damage every time an instant or sorcery is played because of this, and then also the 1 damage from Niv-Mizzet Parun, 1 damage from Niv-Mizzet the Firemind, so we're just dealing all the damage. Last but not least, we have 36 lands. Caldera Lake, it's one of the Pain lands. Enters tapped. Either A, tap it for colorless mana, or B, add blue or red to your mana pool. It deals 1 damage to you. Evolving Wilds is next. It's a land, tap, sacrifice Evolving Wilds, search your library for a basic land card, and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Shuffle your library. So since we need 3 of one color and 3 of the other for one spell in this deck in particular, which is the commander, then Evolving Wilds is great. We can go, if we have more islands, we can go get a mountain. If we have more mountains, we can go get an island. Speaking of islands and mountains, there are 15 islands, and there are 14 mountains. So, Izzet Boilerworks is next. It's one of the bounce lands. Comes into play tapped. When it does come into play, return a land you control to its owner's hand, and then when you can tap it, add blue-red to your mana pool. Yeah, that's pretty simple, right? Izzet Guildgate. It's a gate, so enters battlefield tapped. We can tap it for either of our colors. Cure Keep is next. It's a legendary land. I don't necessarily know why, but tap, add 1 to your mana pool, or pay 1 and a red. Tap, put a 0/1 red Kobold creature token named Kobold of Cure Keep into play. So 0/1s don't really matter, but again, Altar of the Brood cares about that. We have Goblin War Party, so it'll get +1/+1, and then we keep making those over and over again as we go. We make our stuff bigger. Reliquary Tower, just another way to make it so we have no maximum hand size, because again, playing a whole bunch of cards every turn. And last but not least is Terramorphic Expands. It's the exact same thing as Evolving Wilds, but I'll read it again since we're here. We're almost at the end of the podcast. Tap, sacrifice Terramorphic Expanse, search your library for a basic land card, and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So, that's it. Basically, this deck is going to play very slowly until we get Niv-Mizzet Parun or Niv-Mizzet the Firemind. Melek is also a good one. And then once we get those key pieces out, we're going to start casting instants and sorceries like crazy, using enchantments and artifacts to be able to do that even cheaper. So that's it for the podcast. If you like this, like, comment, subscribe, follow any of the links below. And it also just depends on how you listen to this. If you're listening to this on Stitcher, we're actually new there, so please make sure you subscribe. Anyways, thanks for the listen. Later.